Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be reading to you some articles out of this issue of History magazine. I tried to come up with a theme for this, and you can tell by the title, I suppose. I haven't thought of the title yet, actually. Something like Ancient Conquerors, Ancient Heroes, something like that. To loosely tie these two articles together. But as you can tell by the cover, we're going to be talking about Philip of Macedon and his son Alexander the Great, and kind of their rivalry in a sense. We're also going to be reading about Thutmose III fighting the Battle of Megiddo. So I suppose Ancient Conquerors, something like that. I'll come up with something good. Unknown stories of ancient conquerors, I don't know. But these articles were not chosen by me, they were chosen by my channel members. They were chosen by Pepsi, Chris W, Luna, and Lucas F. Thank you so much for picking these articles for us to read. And if you, watching this, would like to pick a future article, you can join my channel memberships by clicking the join button right down there. Or if you're on mobile, you can open up the description box, and the very first link there will be for channel memberships. It is only 99 US cents a month, and you get all kinds of fun perks. You get exclusive ad-free members-only content that you guys get to pick. Essentially, you guys choose the topics that I read about. You get your name in every video. You get early access to every single one of my videos, so on and so forth. And now's the time to join if you want to pick a future article, because I got my new issue in last week, and I've already made the list for you guys to choose from. I'll post that, do a little video for the channel members so that they can hear me describe each article. I'll post that video about 2 days or so after this goes live to give people time to join. So now is the time, if you're watching this the day it goes up, to become a channel member if you want to be a part of that. But I will stop yapping, and we're going to start with Thutmose III. I realize I didn't bookmark any of these, but look at that, I opened right up to it. The Battle of Megiddo. Thutmose III conquers the East. Let's read these articles here. The death of Queen Hatshepsut opened the door to rebellion in the Levant. After 22 years in power, she disappeared from history, and Thutmose III occupied the throne of Egypt alone. A coalition of Canaanite city-states, supported by the Mitanni Empire and rulers of Kadesh, began to rebel against the new pharaoh. It would come to a head in the walled city of Megiddo in what today is Israel. Sited on the plain of Esdraelon, the city would control two trade routes of special interest, one connecting with the coastline and the other leading north to Kadesh. As this was Thutmose's first military campaign, the pressure on him was considerable. The road to Megiddo. According to the large propaganda inscription on the walls of Akhmenu, the temple of Thutmose III at Karnak, the young pharaoh gathered his men and started marching from the border fortress of Jaru in the eastern delta to face that powerful enemy. There is no direct information on the number of soldiers mobilized, although most scholars estimate they probably numbered in the thousands. Nor is it known if the entire army set out from Egypt, or if units that were already stationed in Asian territory were incorporated later. It took 10 days for the troops to travel the so-called Way of Horus, north of Sinai, and reach Gaza. North of Sinai and reach Gaza. The distance is around 125 miles, which indicates that the soldiers marched an average of 12.5 miles a day. From Gaza, they advanced to the enclave of Yehem, about 25 miles from Megiddo. There the pharaoh met with his officers to assess the situation and decide which of the 3 existing routes to Megiddo would be the most suitable. The northern route crossed the lands of Zepti. The southern route would take them close to Tanakh. The central and most dangerous route would send them through the narrow Aruna Pass. The Annals of Thutmose III, a propagandistic record of his military campaigns inscribed in the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, details how Thutmose handles the decision. His generals urged him not to make them take the Aruna Pass. Let our victorious Lord march by the road he wishes, but let him not oblige us to go by the most perilous route. But Thutmose was determined to defy his enemies, and, by taking the most dangerous route, show that he didn't fear them. He swore an oath by the sun god Amun-Ra, saying, "My majesty will march by this Aruna road." He also determined that he himself would lead the army through the narrow pass. "None shall march on this road in front of my majesty." When the time came, he himself did march at the head of his army, showing the way with his own steps. The route he chose was just over 8 miles long, with parts of it only 30 feet wide. With steep walls on either side, it was the perfect place for the enemy to ambush an advancing army from above, as there was no room for maneuver. However, assuming the Egyptians would never risk such reckless exposure, the enemy had only stationed soldiers on the other 2 paths. Thutmose's army was able to march the route through the Aruna Pass in 1 day without any problem. The soldiers emerged into the Kina Valley to the astonishment of enemy troops who were encamped near the city of Megiddo. Sorry for my bubbly tummy. The Egyptian advance. At dawn the following day, the Egyptian army was mobilized, dividing and deploying in 3 large units that advanced in crescent formation toward an encampment of Asian forces to the south of Megiddo. The inscription at Karnak records that the southern wing of His Majesty's army was at a hill south of the Kina or brook, and the northern wing to the northwest of Megiddo, while His Majesty was in their center, Amun protecting his person in the tumult, and the strength of Seth pervading his limbs. That maneuver sparked panic among the enemy warriors. Many of them abandoned their tents and rushed toward Megiddo. The pharaoh's troops set about plundering their camp, which allowed many of the Asian forces to escape. Some Asian commanders were hoisted to safety over the walls of Megiddo by those inside who were defending the city. Others must have run northward to get as far away from the Egyptian troops as possible. The chronicles point out with a certain bitterness that if the soldiers of Thutmose III had pursued the fleeing troops in that phase of the confrontation, the victory would have been quick and definitive. When they, the enemy chiefs, saw His Majesty overwhelming them, they fled headlong to Megiddo with terrified faces, abandoning their horses, their chariots of gold and silver, so as to be hoisted up into the town by pulling at their garments. For the people had shut the town behind them, and they now lowered garments to hoist them up into the town. Now if His Majesty's troops had not set their hearts to plundering the possessions of the enemies, they would have captured Megiddo at this moment. This portion was less of a battle and more like a series of skirmishes with the Egyptians on the offensive. Siege and victory. Faced with the impossibility of taking the city by assault, the Egyptians decided to besiege it, building a series of fortifications with wood they obtained by felling trees in the surrounding area. The annals of Thutmose III show how he emphasized the strategic importance of conquering Megiddo. Every prince of every northern land is shut up within it. The capture of Megiddo is the capture of 1,000 cities. Finally, after 7 months of siege, the city surrendered. Among the enemy leaders captured inside was the ruler of Megiddo. The Prince of Kadesh, commander-in-chief of the Asian coalition, did, however, manage to escape. An extraordinary booty. The written sources preserve a long and detailed list of the booty obtained after the conquest of Megiddo. They indicate that there were 83 enemy dead and 340 prisoners, but these figures may only include individuals who were seen as significant. Apart from herds, provisions, and other objects, the Egyptian army took 2,041 horses, 924 chariots, among which were the chariots carved in gold belonging to the rulers of Kadesh and Megiddo, 200 sets of armor, and 502 composite bows. These bows, of Mesopotamian origin, were very expensive and highly sought after. The body armor, made of hardened leather or bronze mail, was innovative at that time. There is no mention of helmets, although their use was widespread during the rule of Thutmose III. This is demonstrated both by the lists of tributes from Asia and by the paintings in some private Theban tombs, in which foreigners paying tribute are shown wearing helmets. Myth and might. The immediate consequence of the victory was the consolidation of pharaonic control over much of what is today Israel and the Palestinian territories. The stunning victory and expansion of the pharaoh's control would live in the Egyptian imagination as the beginning of a new era of regional greatness. General Jehuti, appointed governor of the conquered areas by Thutmose, would later be immortalized as the hero in an ancient Egyptian tale, the taking of Joppa. Recounting how Jehuti used his ingenuity to conquer the city of Joppa, which today is Jaffa near Tel Aviv, Israel, by smuggling soldiers into the city, hidden in baskets. This story preceded the Trojan horse plot device used in Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, by centuries. It is also a likely source for the Arabic folk tale Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, in which the eponymous thieves attempt to smuggle themselves into a house in jars of lamp oil. Beyond inspiring great stories, the Megiddo triumph forged new political and diplomatic realities across the region. The new Canaanite territory provided a closer starting point for Egypt to launch future campaigns into Mesopotamia. News of the impressive victory prompted monarchies in the Near East to send ambassadors to Thebes, capital of Egypt, with sumptuous gifts, hoping to curry favor with the pharaoh. Following his victory, Thutmose III leveraged his position to expand Egypt's power in Asia through an ambitious program of conquests in Syria. The annals inscribed on the wall of the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak mention 16 other campaigns, although in some cases no details have been preserved. These military operations took place between 1454 and 1437 BCE and can be divided into distinct phases. The first phase involved the conquest of important port cities such as Ulaza and Samira to facilitate transport to and from Egypt and to provide storage points. The second phase involved the occupation of much of central Syria, thereby neutralizing the strength of the city of Kadesh. The third phase consisted of a direct attack on Mitannian territories, while the fourth phase included a series of campaigns aimed at suppressing uprisings in certain conquered territories. Even accounting for Thutmose's campaign of self-mythologization and the inevitable exaggeration that is built into the claims and boasts of the annals of Thutmose III, many scholars view the details of this account as a reliable source. In fact, the Battle of Megiddo is one of the earliest well-documented battles of history. This major turning point not only expanded Egyptian territory, but also marked the first solo success of one of the greatest military leaders in ancient Egypt. Let's see. Yeah, we have a map here, the Shadow of Mitanni. It says Thutmose III's main enemy was the powerful Mitanni Empire, made up of the Hurrian tribes who dominated what today is eastern Turkey. They came into conflict with Egypt over control of Syria. Because this territory was the key path for trade routes through the Near East, the Mitanni encouraged Syrian and Canaanite princes to push back against Egypt, setting the stage for the Megiddo endgame. Here's the map here. It says Thutmose III's first and sixth campaigns were aimed at controlling the rebel enclaves of Megiddo and Kadesh, while in his eighth campaign he defeated forces of the Mitanni Empire. In the following century, the Mitanni disappeared as the Hittites pushed east, later becoming Egypt's principal enemy in the eastern Mediterranean. So we can see his campaign right here, heading up from the Nile along the coast. There's Gaza, there's Megiddo right there. And then I guess it splits there, heading toward Damascus up to Kadesh. Well, this one's going along the coast at Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, up to Kadesh, hopping over to Samira. And then heading farther north to these towns I've actually never heard of, but heading up to Aleppo. And heading up as far north as this town, Carchemish. Never heard of that one either. Big long campaign up the Levant here. And here you can see there's the Hittite Empire and the Mitanni Empire. There's Turkey up here, which Turkey's up here. The Mitanni right there. Alright. Here is a really cool map of the Battle of Megiddo. Let's see what this points out. A key moment in Thutmose III's triumphant first campaign and conquest of Megiddo was the daring decision made by the pharaoh to enter the Aruna Pass. There's Aruna and the Aruna Pass here. Heading into the city area here. The Canaanite forces that left this route unguarded, believing the pharaoh would not expose his army to the possibility of deadly attack from the high ground on either side of the gorge. By taking this risky route, the Egyptian forces were able to take their enemy by surprise at Megiddo, which is right here. They came out through here. Surprise. The fortress where the troops of the princes of Rechenu, as the Egyptians called the region of Syria and Canaan, were concentrated. The Egyptians gave their opponents no time to react. At dawn the next day, they were deployed in 3 divisions that advanced on the Canaanites and their allies with the intention of subduing their flanks and overwhelming them. Thutmose III was in the Central Division number 3, heading this way. Unable to resist the onslaught, the Asian troops fled in disarray, and several of their leaders ran to take refuge in the walled city of Megiddo, while the Egyptians were engaged in looting their camp, which is number 4. Here's their encampment. So the Egyptians set up here and over here. Not much you can do at that point. They're coming in. They're looting the encampment. As the Megiddo fortress defenders had closed their gates to prevent the Egyptians from forcing their way in, the fleeing commanders had to be hoisted ignominiously over the city wall by ropes tied to their clothes. Megiddo would finally fall after 7 months of siege. It's a neat way to visualize it. This is Karnak, the Temple of Amun-Ra. It says this photograph shows the obelisks erected in the temple by Thutmose I, grandfather to Thutmose III, and Queen Hatshepsut. One of the obelisks erected by Thutmose III at Karnak is now in Rome. Let's see. Vehicle of war and hunting. It says, above, a hunting scene depicting a charioteer graces a gold platter from Syria from around the time that Thutmose III dominated the region. This is located in the Louvre Museum in Paris. It looks like a hunt is going on. They're hunting a deer. You can see hunting dogs and a bull for some reason. It's another hunting dog. The charioteer going after this stag, I suppose. Thutmose the Conqueror. This relief at the 7th pylon Karnak temple complex symbolizes the victories of Thutmose III over his enemies, who cower as he prepares to crush them with his mace. Goodness, it's kind of hard to see. I could see so many faces in here. I guess that's them cowering. Do you see all the faces? Interesting. The Master of North and South, it says. After the victory of Megiddo, Thutmose consolidated his power to the north in Asia and to the south in Nubia. In the 33rd year of his reign, he launched a direct attack against the Mitanni Empire that had sponsored the anti-Egyptian unrest. Mitanni lay beyond the Euphrates River, so Thutmose transported boats by ox-drawn carts from the coastal city of Byblos, which is today in Lebanon. Using these boats, the Egyptians were able to cross the Euphrates, crushing the Mitanni state and strengthening Egypt's hold over the whole region. Thutmose III erected a victory stela far in the south of his lands at Jabal Barkal in Nubia, today in Sudan. He characterized himself as conqueror of both southerners and northerners, who massacres the tribes of Asia and who smites the nomads of Nubia. So this is his victory stela here from Jebel Barkal. However, this is apparently currently located at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It's so tiny writing. Mighty Baal. This is Baal, the god of war, depicted on a 15th century BCE stela found in Syria. Baal was worshipped by the Canaanites, whom Thutmose defeated at Megiddo, and this is located at the Louvre in Paris. It's Megiddo. Located on a hill in the north of present-day Israel, Megiddo controlled the important trade route linking Egypt with Mesopotamia by the mid-15th century BCE. So that's what it looks like today. At least it's ruins, right? I wonder what this was. Don't know. Amenemheb. There we go. Amenemheb, the model officer. Military officials of ancient Egypt who won fame and fortune could expect a lavish tomb. The achievements of Thutmose III's commander Amenemheb, nicknamed Mahu, are partially preserved on a wall of his tomb. They record that he fought in many Asian campaigns, killing and capturing enemies, amassing a substantial booty, and being rewarded by Thutmose III with promotions and expensive gifts. They also relate several curious episodes, such as when he killed a mare in heat that the ruler of Kadesh had sent into the ranks of Egyptian chariots to distract the horses, or when he helped the pharaoh kill an elephant after a military operation in Syria. This reference provides tantalizing evidence that the pharaohs of the time hunted elephants in the Syrian region of Nia after having fought their northern enemies. Let's see what it says here. The tomb of Amenemheb, commander under Thutmose III. On the lintel, the deceased appears in a hunting scene. And this is located at the Theban necropolis of Sheikh Abd el-Qurna. Because there he is on the hunt. Down here you can see him going through the Aruna Pass. Depiction there, leading the way, of course. This Greywick statue of Thutmose III depicts the king wearing the nemes, the royal headdress, with the uraeus, which is this cobra up here. Hope you can see, yep. And this is at the Museum of Luxor in Egypt. We won't read the timeline, we just read the whole article. Let's see, here is Hatshepsut. Oh, this is Hatshepsut. This is Amun-Ra, and he's blessing her. This is in the Karnak temple of Amun-Ra. And who's this down here? A Nubian prisoner. It's beautiful, looks like it's in lapis. In addition to his campaigns in the Levant, Thutmose III imposed Egyptian rule over Nubia, which is in present-day Sudan, to the south. This is located at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And then we just have this big painting here. All these chariots, you can see all the soldiers here with their shields. Battle of Megiddo. And then there's, that's really pretty down here. What is that? Let me see, hold on. Below right, golden patera, or bowl, that Thutmose presented to General Jehudi. Awesome. And that's located in the Louvre as well. Alright, let's head over. You know what I'm going to do? Can you hear these wires banging around? I'm going to adjust this real quick. So hopefully you won't hear a bunch of wires banging around. It's distracting me, so I hope it's not distracting you. Hold on. Maybe you like the sound. I don't know. Is that better or worse? Goodness gracious. If I put it right here. There we go. Okay, that's much better. Now let's head over to Alexander and Philip. Alexander the Great and his father Philip of Macedon. It says on the bottom here, Alexander the Great's clashes with his father are chronicled in vivid detail. Yet in spite of the tensions, Philip saw Alexander as his heir and raised him to rule. This is a really neat article. I really liked reading it. It talks about a time of Alexander's life that you don't really hear about. His teen years. Alexander the Great's childhood has often been presented as a time of conflict between his parents, Philip II and Olympias. But this image, so often explored in novels and films, is likely exaggerated. Most of the sources preserved from this period are Athenian. No Macedonian writings have survived. So it was Philip's enemies, with their subjective and even manipulated accounts, who shaped what we know about the intricacies of the Macedonian court. Nevertheless, dynastic tensions evidently ran high at the court of Philip, and one factor that had an impact on family relations was the practice of polygamy. Marriage in Macedonia was a politically oriented institution, often used to establish diplomatic relations or ensure royal succession. Philip had 7 wives, but among them they bore him only 2 sons, Philip III Arrhidaeus and Alexander. Some sources say there was a third, Caranus, who may have died in childhood, although his existence is doubtful. The lack of a clear system for royal succession and the multitude of wives without any formal hierarchy increased conflict at court. Becoming the best candidate to inherit the throne depended on several factors. Foremost was to be a member of the Argead dynasty, descended from Perdiccas I, who founded the Kingdom of Macedonia in the 7th century BCE. Until Alexander's death, all the kings of Macedonia had come from this family. A second determining factor was the political prestige and importance of the maternal family. If the mother belonged to Macedonian nobility, support for an heir among the local aristocracy would be stronger. The sons of foreign women, such as Olympias, who came from Epirus, had in principle less legitimacy. A third factor was the support a potential heir could muster among different factions within the kingdom. This was key to ensuring political stability. Although the final decision rested with the monarch, his wives had a role in placing their male offspring in the race for succession. In this context, Alexander had a relatively straightforward path to power. His older half-brother Arrhidaeus was mentally incapacitated. Some sources attribute this to Olympias poisoning him in order to remove him as a candidate for the throne. Alexander, meanwhile, was brought up in a manner befitting a Macedonian prince. His training combined traditional disciplines such as grammar, rhetoric, arithmetic, and geometry with physical activities like hunting and battle training. The most notable of his teachers was Aristotle, to whom Philip entrusted the education of his son for 3 years. Smooth sailing at first. While very young, Alexander was able to put into practice the solid education that his father had so carefully designed. Around 340 BCE, during one of Philip's numerous absences, Alexander had to act as regent at barely 16 years old. The sources describe how he led a successful campaign against the Thracian tribe of the Maedi and went on to establish a military settlement he called Alexandropolis Medica, the first of many cities he would found and name after himself. His promising career continued with the Battle of Chaeronea. His father assigned him to lead the left wing of the Macedonian army to disrupt the advance of the sacred band of Thebes. After the victory, it was Alexander who, in the company of the general Antipater, took charge of the subsequent negotiation in Athens, a precursor to the League of Corinth, a coalition of Greek city-states under Philip. The young prince was already shaping up to be a worthy successor to his father. It seems that up until this moment, Philip, Olympias, and Alexander had a reasonably good relationship. In fact, after the victory of Chaeronea, Philip had a symbolic monument, the Philippion, built to celebrate the triumph of the Argead dynasty over the Greeks. The circular stone building includes statues of Philip, his parents, Amyntas III and Eurydice I, Alexander, and Olympias. To include a statue of Alexander here was a clear indication that Philip had singled Alexander out as heir to the throne. The first clash. Shortly after erecting the lavish tribute, Philip made a controversial decision. to marry a young woman from the Macedonian aristocracy named Cleopatra. To date, none of Philip's wives had been Macedonian. Audata was Illyrian. Phila was from Elymea. Philina and Nicesipolis were from Thessaly. Olympias, Alexander's mother, was a princess of Epirus, and the sixth, Medea, was of Thracian origin. With Cleopatra, it was different. Greek writer Athenaeus notes that Philip was violently in love with her. But as in previous marriages, there was likely a political purpose too. Earlier, Philip had shown no interest in marrying into the Macedonian nobility, but now he considered it necessary in order to garner support before beginning his invasion of Persia. Cleopatra was the niece of Attalus, one of the generals who was to lead the offensive, so this link was key. The decision to marry Cleopatra provoked unease in Alexander's circle, since any future male descendant could jeopardize his succession. The situation exploded during a banquet on the eve of Philip and Cleopatra's wedding. Attalus, Cleopatra's uncle, took advantage of the toast to proclaim his desire for Cleopatra to ensure a legitimate heir for the kingdom. Alexander, who interpreted the statement as a personal attack, lashed out and was publicly reprimanded by Philip, who was perhaps compelled by the norms of hospitality. After this serious disagreement, Alexander went into exile with his mother Olympias, and possibly with his closest friends. First, he took refuge at the court of his uncle, Alexander of Epirus, and then he was able to stay with Lingaris, king of the Agrianians. Never heard of them. The second confrontation. It's possible that there were other reasons behind Alexander's exile. It's been suggested that Philip wanted to leave Alexander in charge of Greek affairs during the invasion, and that his son had not taken well to this important but secondary role. Whatever the true reasons for the exile, Philip knew he couldn't venture into Asia before putting his own house in order, so he opened the way for Alexander to return. Peace was short-lived, however, according to a somewhat confusing account from Plutarch about what happened next, the so-called Pixodaris affair. Although its chronology and veracity are doubtful, the affair points to a growing distrust of Alexander toward his father. According to Plutarch, Philip, eager to establish a foothold in Asia, had arranged to marry his son Archidaeus to the daughter of the Persian satrap Pixodaris. Alexander, wary that this marriage would relegate him to second place, interfered in the negotiations by putting himself forward as a potential husband. The interference ruined his father's plans, and he meddled in something that was the exclusive prerogative of the king, to broker marriages for members of the dynasty. Some researchers have suggested that Philip intended to follow a Macedonian custom and arrange the marriage of his last wife, who was Cleopatra, to his son Alexander. This would have sent a clear signal that Philip was passing his kingdom to Alexander, and maybe why Philip had not thought of Alexander as a suitor. An unexpected death. Soon after, Philip was assassinated in Aigai while celebrating the wedding of his daughter, also named Cleopatra, to her uncle Alexander of Epirus, brother of Olympias. The assassin, Pausanias, was a member of the king's guard. Some accounts state he committed the assassination in revenge, feeling spurned by Philip, whom he loved. What is certain are the consequences of the attack. Alexander was proclaimed king by the army. He eliminated any rivals who could overshadow him, a customary practice to avoid sources of instability. The purge was far-reaching, from Attalus, prominent in Asia, to Amyntas IV, Philip's nephew, who had reigned briefly while still a child, with Philip acting as regent. For her part, Olympias, according to the historian Justin, killed Europa, Cleopatra's daughter, and then forced Cleopatra to hang herself in front of the little girl's corpse. Yikes. With the way clear and rivals purged, Alexander ascended the throne. It's hard to gauge how close father and son had truly been, but Alexander's achievements and rise to greatness should be seen in the context of his relationship with Philip. Interesting, isn't it? We're going to read this page first. Alexander's love-hate relationship, which is the last one, right? Okay. Alexander's love-hate relationship. When Alexander's troops mutinied at the Opis River in 324 BCE, he made a speech emphasizing the important role his father had played. He, Philip, found you wandering about without resources, pasturing small flocks in the mountains, defending them against the Illyrians, Triballians, and neighboring Thracians. He gave you cloaks to wear instead of sheepskins, brought you down from the mountains to the plains, and made you a match in war for the neighboring barbarians. He made you city dwellers and civilized you with good laws and customs. This speech contrasts with the episode some years earlier, when Alexander killed one of his generals, Cletus the Black, during a banquet. According to 1st century Roman historian Quintus Curtius Rufus, Alexander drunkenly boasted that the victory of the battle at Chaeronea was down to him, but his father had jealously detracted from his glory. Alexander claimed that Philip, wounded on the battlefield, had feigned death, that he had shielded his father's body from attack. Incensed at this slur on the honor of Philip, Cletus angrily challenged Alexander, who took up a lance and ran him through. Here we can see it happening here. Let's see what this says. Alexander kills Cletus the Black during the banquet in Samarkand. Yeah. And then this is his mutinous soldiers at the Opis River, and he's saying, don't do it. But I think that was around the time they turned around anyway, wasn't it? I think so. During his invasion of Asia. The murky death of Philip of Macedonia. According to ancient sources, Pausanias murdered Philip out of revenge. Pausanias was thought to be the king's former lover and was jealous of his new relationship with the attendant. After a quarrel between Pausanias and the new lover, the attendant self-exited. To punish Pausanias for causing the self-exit of a friend, Attalus brought in servants to R-word him. My goodness, so many non-YouTube friendly words in this. Pausanias denounced Attalus to Philip, but the king took no action against Attalus, who was his wife Cleopatra's uncle. But did Pausanias act alone? Historians Plutarch and Justin suggest that the instigator was Olympias, as revenge for being spurned by Philip when he married Cleopatra. It would have been in Alexander's interests to ensure his father didn't have children with Cleopatra, since they would challenge his claim to the throne. 2nd century historian Arrian, attributes the plot to the Persians in a bid to stop Philip's planned invasion. Other suspects include Demosthenes, the leader of the Athenian resistance, certain nobles of Upper Macedonia, or the Macedonian general Antipater. The incident remains a great historical whodunit. There's a depiction of Alexander here wearing a lion's head. It says emulating Heracles. The facade of the royal necropolis at the site of Aigai, attributed to Philip II, was found intact with splendid grave goods by the archaeologist Manolis Andronicus in 1977. How neat. Let's see what's over here. Magnificent mosaics still amaze visitors to the ruins of the royal palace in Aigai, in modern-day Virginia, where Philip II was assassinated by a bodyguard in 56 BCE. I hope I'm saying all these pronunciations right. It very well could be wrong, which feel free to correct me in the comments. Doing my best. This is definitely Halicarnassus because you can see the mausoleum right there. The Pyxidorus affair, it says. The illustration recreates the city of Halicarnassus today in western Turkey. Philip attempted to marry his eldest son, the disabled Philip III Arrhidaeus, to the daughter of the Persian allied ruler of Halicarnassus, Pyxidorus. Fearing an erosion of the clouds in the way, his status, Alexander sabotaged the match. This one's much easier to read. A white font on a dark background. The banquet that set father against son. Plutarch recounts the clash between Alexander and Philip during the banquet, marking Philip's marriage to Cleopatra. Attalus now was the girl's uncle and called upon the Macedonians to ask of the gods that from Philip and Cleopatra there might be born a legitimate successor. Alexander was exasperated and cried, "Do you take me for a bastard?" and threw a cup at him. Then Philip rose up against Alexander, but fortunately for both, his anger and his wine made him trip and fall. Why is this funny? Then Alexander, mocking over him, said, "Look now, men, here's one who was preparing to cross from Europe into Asia, and he's fallen and trying to cross from couch to couch. Oh, burn. Alexander." Goodness. It says this 88-pound Derveni crater discovered in a tomb was made in the early 4th century BCE. They were made to mix undiluted wine with water. Very fancy. And here's Philip II down here. In silver, this is at the Louvre Museum in Paris. It says he's wearing a white silk ribbon that was the emblem of royalty. This is what's left of the Philippion at Olympia. It says Philip built this for the glory of the Argead dynasty after its decisive victory over Athens and Thebes in Chaeronea in 338 BCE. It is located in the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, one of the most important Greek sanctuaries. Let's read about Chaeronea. Again, I hope that's how you pronounce that. Alexander, victorious at Chaeronea. In the summer of 338 BCE, near the city of Chaeronea, a decisive battle took place between the Macedonian forces and the combined troops of Athens, Thebes, and other Greek cities that opposed Philip's expansionism. Philip, leading the right wing of his army, feigned a retreat that tricked the enemy into opening their ranks. Alexander, in command of the left wing, took advantage to charge against the most powerful enemy unit, the elite corps known as the Sacred Band of Thebes. This unit was formed of 150 pairs of same-sex lovers. Most of them perished in the fighting. After the battle, Alexander, who was then just 18 years old, demonstrated his political acumen in addition to his military prowess. Philip sent him to Athens to sign a peace agreement, and Alexander took with him 2,000 freed Athenian prisoners and the ashes of another 1,000 fallen that he delivered to the city. The dramatic gesture, calculated to diminish Athenian humiliation, was well received. And they erected this lion over the grave of the members of the Sacred Band of Thebes that were killed at the battle. And here's Alexander and Bucephalus, his favorite horse. It's Roman sculptures based on a 4th century BC original by Lysippus. Yeah, because there's not a lot. I think there's only like one famous piece of art from Alexander's time that survives that actually depicts Alexander. Let's see. I don't think it's in here, but it's the one you've seen of Alexander. It's everywhere. Olympias, perfidious or maligned. The sources depict Olympias as vengeful and ruthless. However, these accounts should be read critically. The author Plutarch, who lived centuries after her, influenced this extreme characterization and is known for misogynistic accounts and often fabricated anecdotes. Plutarch recorded the infamous story in which Philip finds his wife, Olympias, asleep in bed with a serpent beside her. Perhaps fearing that she is an enchantress, Philip loses interest in her. The couple would later become yet more estranged after the clash between Alexander and Philip on the eve of Philip's wedding with Cleopatra. Olympias accompanied her son into exile, and according to the 3rd century CE Roman historian Justin, tried to conspire against her husband from Epirus. Some sources depict Olympias as the brains behind the plot to kill Philip and the subsequent brutality to Philip's 7th wife, Cleopatra. It is likely that behind the larger-than-life vengefulness attributed to her, a skillful political operator was at work. It says this is possibly Olympias and Alexander, depicted here, whose helmet features a snake. It says that's how we think it's her. This is at the Hermitage in Russia. Olympus visited by Zeus in the guise of a serpent. Alexander was said to be the son of Zeus himself. That's true. Oh, interesting. So yeah, I guess the story of her being in bed next to a snake, that was allegedly Zeus. Alexander was born. And of course, he told the Greeks that he was the descendant of Ammon, it says here. Clever, Alexander. The shrine of the nymphs of Mieza, is that what it says? Where Aristotle taught young Alexander. Near this modern-day city of Nausa, I think, in northern Greece. And there's Aristotle down there. And here's a map of everything here. Macedonia in 359 BCE is in the Pale here. No, sorry, I've read it completely backwards. Is the dark one. 359 BCE is right here. But by 336 BCE, it's all down here, and all up here is what Philip conquered. And huge swaths of Greece into what's now North Macedonia, into Thrace. You can see here in Bulgaria and Turkey. Here's the family tree. It says, above the heads of Philip II and Alexander, from the royal tombs of Aigai, a woman believed to be Olympias is depicted on the 3rd century BCE medallion, right here, from the treasury of Abukir, Egypt. Yeah, we won't go over the whole family tree. A little too complicated with all those wives. And then here's their busts. It says here, these busts of Philip II, which is over here, which is at the Vatican apparently, and Alexander, which is here in the Capitoline Museum in Rome, are Roman copies of Greek originals. The symbol of Philip's Argead dynasty, the gold disc, which is down here, can you see right here, was found at the site of its capital, Aigai, Regina, in northern Greece. Aigai, I don't know. I don't know all the detail names, but yeah, interesting, isn't it? I learned a lot in this article. Maybe you did too. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really, really helps out with the algorithm and all of that. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. Also, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night.